Yeah, I've been saying this for about a month, and
Right.
after the election last Saturday, we start looking at the governor's race because we just had a statewide race. But all I've said is that John Kennedy is a player in state politics much more so than much more so than most senators. He's back home involved in issues. He's in fights with the Democratic governor on Medicaid or spending or taxes or anything else. So John Kennedy is very involved in the politics down back home. He may be in Washington as a senator, but he certainly plays, he's certainly involved in everyday political issues here in Louisiana. So, and being a United States senator and being able to talk to the Republican National Governors Association, being able to talk to the National Republican Party with 2019 approaching, and are the Republicans going to allow a Democrat to maintain control of state government in a deep South state? So if Kennedy wants to run, it's going to be hard for anyone to displace him as the person that is going to get the money or get the endorsements or get the support or get the Republican machinery taken away from him. So how do you run it? How do you push him out of the way? So until my point is, until John Kennedy tells us whether he's interested in coming back home or not, everybody else is almost going to have to take a wait and see if you're a Republican. And look, there are potential other candidates. You've got Congressman Garrett Graves out there. The big news, the big talk, the big rumor right now is will Steve Scalise come back home? You've got the Attorney General Jeff Landry, whose name is always mentioned. So there are other people who may or may not run for governor, but until Kennedy decides what he wants to do, it doesn't mean they can't run, but it means that, and I've said it to you, and it means that the Republicans, if there's a fight with Kennedy over who runs, then that's the best chance that Governor John Bel Edwards has to get reelected. If the Republicans are united, it's very difficult for a Democrat to win statewide. And if they fight among themselves and get into another bruising battle and attack each other 12 and 24, then certainly they can reelect John Bel Edwards. But at the present time, I don't see that happening. But what I do see happening is Kennedy will make his decision, and then everything will start falling in line after that, whether it's him or someone else. But a lot of the Republicans, if he doesn't run, and there are some who would rather see him run, is Steve Scalise, because I don't think anyone thinks that he would have a lot of trouble becoming governor if he wants to. I mean, he's just, he's been in the legislature. He's a national hero here in Louisiana, and if he wants to come back home, no other Republican, including the Democratic governor, it would, you know, he would be such an odds-on favorite to, if he wants to be governor. I don't know how you would stop him.
Interesting. So, you think Kennedy would be able to stop him, assuming that both wanted to be governor?
Well, I think it would be a disaster if both of them ran.
But I mean, in terms of beginning to compete against one another, both say, "Hey, this is a job I want." Um, Maybe both don't run, but still, position one another.
If
Position
they
that, yeah,
if they ran and never mentioned each other, one of them would make it in the runoff, and it wouldn't be that big a deal. For the runoff is when they start attacking each other and savage each other and call each other names and bring up scandals related to prostitution and all the other stuff that occurred in the last election. Then John Bel Edwards has a better than average chance to get reelected. But
sure.
you
No,
would see, I
yeah.
think you would see. I don't see both of them running. If
No, that's let me interrupt you and just say that what I'm really referring to is over the next year. As you mentioned, John Kennedy it's his to decide. And I'm just throwing out, well, what about Steve Scalise? Is it, could you say the same thing about him? And what if, say in the next 6 months or so, both say, hey, we'd like to run. Who's really in the catbird seat? Would it be Scalise or Kennedy?
I don't know. That's a good question. I I think most Republicans, that would be their worst nightmares to have both of them run, and not decide between them which one of them should run and one of them steps aside. But I don't know. I mean, I know that I think, look, Kennedy's a United States senator, and senators are, with the exception of Scalise, who is powerful because he's got a position of power in the House. But Kennedy's still a United States senator, and United States senators are in Washington. Each one of them are very powerful within not only their state but within the national government. You only have 100 of them, and every one of them are very powerful politically, no matter where you look at them from.
Sure.
But so I don't know. That will I don't. Will Kennedy step aside if Scalise is running? Look, John Kennedy he's got a great job. Being a senator is a great job. He gets a lot of TV time. He gets a lot of exposure, and he seems to like it, and he seems to be becoming a player up there. There are people that probably would say to John Kennedy, look, you're doing extremely well. You're all over the news. For you to come back here, we're going to lose your seniority. We're going to lose the power that you're obviously acquiring. And Louisiana has lost so much in the last 10 years as far as power in Washington. People are going to question him about, hey, we elected you to be senator. Why don't you stay there? Because we think you're going to end up being very powerful and be able to help Louisiana. Whether Kennedy, what Kennedy does, or whether he buys that argument, or whether, he can also say, look, I can run, and if I don't win, I'll still go back to United States Senate. Same thing for Scalise. So
Sure.
there are a lot of various angles that this avenues, I guess would be more appropriate, that these guys can go down. But I think that most people would think that if Kennedy's running, why would Scalise run? If he does that, he'd probably have to give up his leadership. So if Kennedy's running and he runs, he's going to give up his leadership, and maybe he can get past Kennedy, maybe he can. But when he goes back to Washington, he'll only be a congressman, and he won't. He probably will have lost his powerful position as number 3 in the House. I don't think you can maintain that and come back home and run for governor, because you're not going to be in Congress. You're not going to be in Washington a lot.
Right. Well, he wasn't in Washington a lot when he was recovering.